The one move that makes a woman rethink everything isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, powerful, and deliberate. It's consistency, self-respect, and calm detachment. It's pursuing purpose, holding boundaries, and showing true value without words. In that single act, she sees authenticity, strength, and a man who cannot be taken for granted. We live in a world where words are easy, promises are cheap, and explanations come in abundance. Anyone can say, I care, I'll be there, or I'll change, but actions are different. Actions are rare. Actions are costly. Actions demand presence, courage, and intention. They are the true measure of character, the silent language that reveals who someone truly is. A woman sees through words quickly. She can feel when words are hollow, when apologies are rehearsed, and when declarations are meant to soothe rather than prove. But she cannot ignore action. Action speaks with a clarity that words can never achieve. It doesn't have to be dramatic or grand. Sometimes the smallest acts carry the heaviest weight. A man who shows up when he says he will, who honors his promises without needing applause, who respects her space while protecting his own boundaries, these are the moments that leave a mark. She notices the consistency, the alignment between thought, word, and behavior. She notices when someone doesn't just talk about love, but demonstrates it quietly, persistently, without seeking acknowledgement. That consistency speaks louder than any passionate declaration ever could. Words can comfort in the moment, but they fade. Actions last. They accumulate over time, creating a pattern, a story that cannot be rewritten. A woman who has learned to observe, to listen with her heart, will recognize this pattern. She will feel the difference between a man who talks about commitment and a man who embodies it. She will see the difference between empty gestures and intentional deeds. She will recognize the power of a man who does not just speak of loyalty, honesty, or respect, but lives by these principles every day. The beauty of action is in its subtlety. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't seek to impress. It simply exists, quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And when she witnesses it, when she sees that unwavering alignment, it changes everything. It challenges her assumptions, reshapes her perspective, and forces her to reconsider her own choices. Because actions are undeniable. They cannot be manipulated or sugar-coated. They reveal the truth. And truth, when lived consistently, has a way of leaving an indelible mark. A single act repeated with integrity can speak louder than 1,000 promises, showing respect when no one is watching, choosing patience over pride, prioritizing values over convenience. These acts are louder than any declaration of love. They command attention, demand respect, and inspire reflection. And in witnessing them, a woman realizes the gravity of character, the power of integrity, and the meaning of true action. Words may begin the conversation, but actions complete the story. In life, we are often drawn to the dramatic, the grand, and the spectacular. Movies and stories glorify the fireworks, the gestures that take your breath away, the surprises that sweep someone off their feet, the declarations that echo loudly in the heart for a moment. But reality is different. Real connection, real respect, and real love are not built on one-time spectacles. They are built on consistency. The quiet, everyday alignment of words and actions is far more powerful than any grand gesture, no matter how impressive it may seem. A woman notices patterns. She notices the little things over time, the way someone shows up, keeps promises, and handles life's challenges. A single grand act may impress for a night, a week, or even a month, but it cannot replace the weight of daily integrity. It cannot substitute for the steady rhythm of a person who proves their character every day in small, deliberate ways. It is in the mundane moments that truth is revealed. The simple acts of respect, patience, and care, repeated quietly and consistently, speak volumes. Consistency is about reliability. It is about being a man of your word, not just when it is convenient or when it earns praise. It is about showing up even when no one is watching, even when life is messy and uncertain. It is in these small, persistent actions that a woman begins to see the depth of someone's character. She sees a man who values integrity over attention, who chooses responsibility over applause, and who understands that trust is not won in moments of extravagance, but in the daily proof of commitment. Grand gestures may create temporary excitement, but consistency creates stability. Grand gestures may inspire admiration, but consistency builds respect. And respect, once earned, is lasting. It does not fade when the fireworks end. It does not vanish when circumstances change. A man who practices consistency, who demonstrates his values through action, becomes a constant in her life, a presence she can rely on, a force she can trust, a reflection of stability she may have longed for without realizing it. Consistency also has the power to transform perceptions. A woman may overlook the small things at first, distracted by flash and drama. But over time, when she witnesses unwavering alignment between words and deeds, she begins to rethink everything she thought she knew about trust, love, and integrity. She begins to question the value of superficial charm and sudden gestures, recognizing instead the quiet strength of consistency. That is the real power, the real magnetism. It is subtle, yet unstoppable. Grand gestures fade. Consistency endures. And in a world obsessed with the spectacular, the man who chooses the steady, persistent, and genuine path stands out, not for what he does once, but for what he does every day. Through this, a woman learns to recognize true worth, not in moments of spectacle, but in the unwavering presence of someone who consistently lives by his principles. Self-respect is silent, but it speaks louder than any words, louder than any attempt to impress, louder than the most dramatic gestures. A man who values himself, who understands his worth, does not beg for attention, does not demand validation, and does not compromise his principles for temporary gain. He moves through life with quiet confidence, setting boundaries, making deliberate choices, and honoring his own values. And in doing so, he commands attention, not through arrogance, but through undeniable presence. A woman notices this. She sees the difference between a man who bends with every opinion and one who stands firm in his integrity. She sees the strength in a man who does not sacrifice his self-respect to please, to manipulate, or to gain approval. She senses it in the way he carries himself, in the way he responds to challenges, in the way he protects his dignity while treating others with respect. Self-respect is magnetic because it is authentic. It cannot be faked, and authenticity always draws notice. It is in the subtle choices that self-respect shines brightest. Choosing not to engage in unnecessary drama, refusing to tolerate disrespect, prioritizing values over fleeting pleasure. These are not loud acts, but they are powerful. They set the tone for how a man is treated, how he is perceived, and how relationships unfold. A woman who witnesses a man exercising self-respect begins to reconsider her own standards, her own expectations, and the kind of energy she allows into her life. She sees the distinction between someone who is guided by principles and someone who is guided by convenience. Self-respect is not just about standing up to others. It is about standing for oneself. It is about knowing where your boundaries lie and refusing to compromise them. It is about maintaining dignity even in the face of disappointment, rejection, or conflict. A man who possesses this quality does not react impulsively, does not chase validation, and does not lose himself in the pursuit of affection. Instead, he shows patience, confidence, and measured action. And it is this restraint, this self-command, that captures attention effortlessly. The truth is, a woman often reevaluates everything she thought she knew when she encounters a man with unwavering self-respect. It challenges her assumptions about strength, worth, and love. She begins to see that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned, and it is reflected first in how a man treats himself. She realizes that self-respect is more attractive than charm, more impactful than persuasion, and far more enduring than temporary flattery. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. A man who commands respect through his self-respect sets a standard, not just for how he expects to be treated, but for how he expects the world to operate around him. He becomes a living example of integrity, confidence, and authenticity. And in that presence, a woman cannot help but take notice, cannot help but rethink the value of connection, and cannot help but recognize the difference between superficiality and true character. Calm detachment is one of the most misunderstood qualities in a man. Many mistake it for indifference, for coldness, for a lack of care, but it is anything but that. Calm detachment is strength disguised in serenity. It is the ability to remain composed when emotions run high, to observe without being consumed, and to act without being driven by impulse. It is a power so subtle, so profound, that it forces others, especially a woman who has known intensity and drama, to pause, reflect, and reconsider everything she thought she understood about him. A man who embodies calm detachment does not chase validation or approval. He does not bend under pressure, nor does he react to provocation with haste. He understands that his peace is his priority, that clarity comes from stillness, and that control over oneself is far more compelling than control over others. This quiet mastery of emotions draws attention because it is rare. In a world dominated by reactions and noise, serenity becomes magnetic. It is not the absence of care, but the presence of discernment. He cares deeply, but he does not let emotion dictate his choices. He feels, but he does not react. He observes, but he does not interfere unnecessarily. And in this balance, he demonstrates a wisdom that cannot be taught. A woman sees it, the way he handles conflict without aggression, the way he listens without judgment, the way he sets boundaries without resentment. She sees a man who is not desperate to prove himself, not hungry for affirmation, and not trapped by the need to control outcomes. And in witnessing this, she begins to rethink her assumptions about strength, attraction, and love. Calm detachment also reveals the truth of a relationship in a way that words never can. When a man steps back, when he allows space, when he refuses to be drawn into unnecessary tension, he exposes what is real and what is superficial. He forces clarity. She begins to see whether connection exists beyond drama, whether intentions are genuine, and whether respect is mutual. There is a transformative power in this quiet distance, one that challenges complacency, demands honesty, and commands attention without a single word being spoken. It is a form of strength that speaks without shouting, influences without controlling, and teaches without instructing. Calm detachment is not about abandoning care. It is about valuing oneself enough to remain unshaken, to maintain dignity, and to act from principle rather than reaction. And in doing so, a man reshapes the perspective of a woman who thought she knew him. She begins to measure him not by his words, but by his presence. She begins to respect him not for what he says, but for what he allows himself to be. She begins to rethink her priorities, her attachments, and the very meaning of respect and admiration. In a world that glorifies intensity, there is nothing more powerful than the quiet strength of calm detachment. It challenges assumptions, reveals truth, and redefines what it means to be seen, valued, and understood. It is the unspoken force that makes a woman pause, reflect, and reconsider everything she thought she knew about a man, a connection, and even herself. In a world obsessed with appearances, it is easy to be captivated by charm, beauty, and the surface level allure of someone who dazzles at first glance. But true connection, the kind that leaves an indelible mark, comes from seeing beyond superficiality. A man who recognizes this, who values substance over flash, who prioritizes depth over spectacle, has a power that few understand, but that every woman instinctively feels. She notices it, sometimes consciously, sometimes intuitively, and it changes everything. Superficial gestures and shallow displays can impress temporarily, but they do not endure. A flashy word, a dramatic statement, a show of affection for attention's sake, they may create an illusion, but they cannot sustain respect, admiration, or trust. Depth, consistency, and authenticity, on the other hand, do. When a man invests in character, in values, in self-awareness, he reveals a world that is invisible to the casual observer. And this is the world that a woman begins to notice, to respect, and ultimately to rethink everything about. Seeing beyond superficiality is about quiet observation, discernment, and intention. It is about choosing to act with integrity even when no one is watching, to maintain dignity when convenience tempts compromise, and to express care without theatrics. It is in the small, deliberate decisions that character is revealed. The way he treats strangers, the way he responds to challenges, the way he honors his promises. She sees that his life is not built on impression, but on principle. She sees that his actions, consistent and authentic, hold a gravity that words cannot match. A woman begins to understand that true worth is not measured by charm or performance, but by the essence of a man's being. It is measured by his ability to navigate life with purpose, by his commitment to values, and by his unwavering authenticity. When she witnesses a man who embodies this depth, she is compelled to reevaluate everything she has known about connection, love, and respect. She begins to differentiate between those who seek attention and those who command it silently, between those who perform and those who live with integrity. This realization is transformative because it forces introspection. She begins to question her own standards, her own choices, and the type of energy she allows into her life. She recognizes that fleeting excitement and superficial charm are temporary, but substance and character endure. She begins to see the difference between the man who merely speaks about commitment and the man who consistently lives it, between the man who dazzles and the man who matters. When a woman sees beyond superficiality, she begins to value authenticity above all else. She begins to measure depth over display and substance over spectacle. And in doing so, a single man, through his deliberate, principled, and authentic way of living, can make her rethink everything she believed about relationships, attraction, and true worth. Ambition is not just about success. It is about direction, purpose, and the courage to pursue what truly matters. A man who embodies vision does not merely drift through life, waiting for opportunities to appear. He creates them. He moves deliberately with a clear understanding of his goals, and he pursues them relentlessly. A woman notices this, not because of flashy achievements, but because of the dedication dedication, discipline, and unwavering focus behind every action. When ambition is paired with integrity and purpose, it becomes magnetic, compelling, and transformative. Actions, not words, reveal true vision. Anyone can speak about dreams, but it is the deliberate steps, the consistent effort, and the strategic choices that define a man's character. She observes how he invests his time, how he prioritizes his energy, and how he handles obstacles. She notices the patience he exercises when progress is slow, the resilience he displays in the face of setbacks, and the humility he maintains despite achievements. These are the markers of genuine ambition, the silent signals that speak volumes more than any proclamation ever could. Ambition also carries with it a certain clarity, a sense of direction that is impossible to ignore. A man with vision does not waste energy on trivialities or superficial pursuits. He is intentional with his actions, conscious of his influence, and careful about the legacy he leaves behind. This precision, this deliberate alignment of action and purpose does not just impress a woman, it compels her to rethink the standards by which she measures worth. She begins to see that true value lies not in charm or fleeting gestures, but in the unwavering pursuit of meaningful goals. Vision and ambition also reflect a deeper form of leadership. A man who pursues purpose naturally inspires those around him. He challenges mediocrity, motivates through example, and demonstrates that success is not measured by accolades alone, but by growth, impact, and the courage to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. A woman witnesses this, consciously or unconsciously, and she begins to reevaluate her perceptions of strength, influence, and commitment. His ambition becomes a mirror for her own aspirations, a quiet invitation to reflect on what she truly values in herself and in others. The beauty of ambition paired with integrity is that it is unshakable. It does not need constant validation or approval. It does not depend on recognition or applause. A man who acts with vision moves with purpose because he understands the weight of every decision, the consequence of every action, and the long-term impact of every choice. And in this, a woman sees the undeniable difference between superficial ambition and authentic drive, the difference between someone who talks about dreams and someone who lives them every day. Actions that reflect vision and ambition reveal a man's true character. They show discipline, foresight, and a commitment to excellence. They inspire respect, demand attention, and create reflection. And in witnessing such a man, a woman cannot help but reconsider everything she thought she knew about priorities, values, and the measure of true worth. Emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful qualities a man can possess, yet it is often overlooked in favor of charm, bravado, or theatrics. While drama is loud, fleeting, and exhausting, emotional intelligence is quiet, steady, and transformative. It is the ability to understand one's own emotions, to navigate conflict with clarity, and to respond with wisdom rather than impulsivity. A woman notices this immediately. She feels the difference between someone who reacts for attention and someone who responds with awareness, someone who is guided by maturity rather than ego. Drama is tempting. It captures attention, sparks curiosity, and creates the illusion of intensity. But drama is also shallow, unpredictable, and unsustainable. Emotional intelligence, on the other hand, creates stability. It allows a man to remain grounded when tensions rise, to communicate effectively when misunderstandings occur, and to make decisions that reflect both integrity and compassion. A woman senses this distinction instinctively. She recognizes that emotional intelligence is not performative. It is lived, breathed, and consistently applied in moments big and small. The true power of emotional intelligence lies in its subtlety. It is not about grand speeches or dramatic reconciliations. It is in the calmness with which he handles disappointment, the patience he exercises when frustration arises, and the respect he shows even in disagreement. It is in the way he listens without judgment, speaks without aggression, and acts without coercion. A woman notices these moments. She sees that he is not swayed by fleeting anger, distracted by triviality, or controlled by insecurity. Instead, he demonstrates mastery over himself, and in doing so, he commands attention effortlessly. Emotional intelligence also transforms relationships. A man who prioritizes understanding over reaction creates space for trust, intimacy, and respect to grow. He allows others to be heard, validates feelings without compromising his own principles, and navigates challenges with empathy rather than hostility. In witnessing this, a woman begins to rethink what she values in a partner. She sees that passion alone is not enough, that intensity without awareness can lead to chaos, and that emotional maturity is far more compelling than any dramatic display of affection or anger. It is in moments of conflict and stress that emotional intelligence becomes most evident. A man who responds with composure rather than fury, who chooses dialogue over manipulation, and who acts with fairness rather than impulsivity demonstrates a strength that words cannot capture. A woman sees this strength, feels its impact, and reevaluates her understanding of respect, connection, and true character. She realizes that emotional intelligence is not just a skill. It is a reflection of a man's values, priorities, and depth. Emotional intelligence over drama is about choosing presence over performance, wisdom over impulse, and integrity over spectacle. It is a quality that reshapes perception, commands respect, and inspires reflection. And in witnessing a man who embodies this, a woman cannot help but reconsider everything she thought she knew about strength, love, and meaningful connection. The move that reveals true value is not loud, not flashy, and often goes unnoticed by those who are distracted by words or appearances. It is deliberate, intentional, and rooted in authenticity. A single act executed with integrity and clarity can illuminate character in a way that years of conversation never could. It is a quiet demonstration of worth, a subtle yet undeniable proof that defines a man's true essence. And when a woman witnesses it, everything she thought she knew begins to shift. This move is rarely dramatic. It does not seek approval or admiration. It is not performed to impress, but to express. It could be a decision to uphold principles when compromise is easier, a choice to walk away when respect is lacking, or a simple act of unwavering consistency in moments when no one is watching. It is these moments that carry the weight of truth. They reveal integrity, patience, and strength, the core elements of real value. A woman senses authenticity instinctively. She notices the difference between someone who performs to be seen and someone who lives in alignment with their values. When a man takes the move that reveals his true worth, she begins to see him not as he says he is, but as he actually is. She sees his priorities, his character, and his principles reflected in action. It is in this clarity that perception changes, in this revelation that respect is earned, and in this moment that attraction deepens, not through charm, but through undeniable substance. The move that reveals true value is also transformative because it forces reflection. She begins to question her own choices, her own standards, and the type of energy she allows into her life. She recognizes that true worth is not measured by attention, words, or superficial gestures, but by integrity, consistency, and courage. She sees that respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And the man who demonstrates this move earns it in ways that words cannot replicate. It is a move that tests patience, discernment, and clarity. It shows that a man does not rely on temporary approval or fleeting affection to define himself. Instead, he acts from principle, knowing that the right decision may not be understood by everyone, but it will always reflect his true value. This is the kind of strength that does not shout for recognition, yet commands it effortlessly. It is a force that reshapes perception, challenges assumptions, and leaves an indelible mark. When a woman witnesses a man make the move that reveals true value, she cannot help but reconsider everything she thought she knew about him, about relationships, and about her own standards. She realizes that worth is demonstrated, not declared, and that character is proven, not performed. In that moment, clarity emerges, perspective shifts, and what was once uncertain becomes undeniable. This single intentional move has the power to redefine connection, respect, and admiration. It is the quiet declaration of a man's authenticity, the unspoken testament to his principles, and the lasting impression of his true value. And in witnessing it, a woman begins to rethink everything, her choices, her expectations, and the kind of man she truly deserves. In the end, it is not the words that define a man, nor the fleeting gestures that impress. It is the quiet, deliberate, and consistent actions that reveal his true essence. It is self-respect that commands attention, calm detachment that shapes perspective, and emotional intelligence that transforms connection. It is vision paired with ambition, integrity reflected in every choice, and the single intentional moves that show what he truly values. A woman notices these things not because they are loud, but because they are real, because they endure, and because they speak a truth that cannot be denied. When a man lives with authenticity, purpose, and unwavering principle, he forces reflection, not through drama, not through spectacle, but through the undeniable weight of character. And in witnessing this, a woman cannot help but rethink everything she thought she knew about him, about relationships, and about what it truly means to be seen, respected, and valued. That is the power of a man who acts with intention, who lives with purpose, and who reveals his worth not in words, but in the legacy of every action he takes.